Hello, everyone. I'm Stephanie Boozer with CUGC HQ, and I'm so happy to welcome you to today's Connect webinar with Goliath Technologies. I'm going to be talking about, I believe the way they phrased it was how to get you off the Citrix Defense Team, and I really like that. They're going to show you how you can document and prove actual Citrix end user experience and not just go off of perceptions, let's say. But before we get started, I just had a couple of announcements. We do have our first in-person CUGC XL in over 2 years. It's coming up next month on May 19th. It's in Kansas City. Everyone is invited to attend. We've got some travel information out on our website for you. We've got a great agenda, lots of great technical content for the day. And I think if you register early enough, we have tickets left for a Chiefs game on, a Kansas City game on the day before for our pregame, and then we also have like lots of fun stuff planned throughout the day, and it's a great experience for you. Other than your travel, it's a free event, so we hope that you'll see us there in Kansas City. All right, so a couple of housekeeping details for you. We are recording today's webinar, so you will get a link to that recording tomorrow. So if you miss anything, you can always go back and catch up. Also, we'd like you to submit your questions throughout the presentation. We'll take most of them at the end, but do put them in as you have them so you don't forget them. And finally, you will get a short survey afterwards. It's just for CUGC use only. It's completely anonymous, and we just like to get your feedback. All right, so with us today is George Spiers. He's a CTP and an EUC architect. We also have Avi Lipp, the technical consultant from Goliath Technologies. Hello, George and Avi.
Hi, Stephanie. Hello. Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. And keeping track of all of your really good questions that I know you're going to have is Stuart Donnelson. He is a Citrix technology advocate. He's also one of the leaders of our Indianapolis CUGC group. Hi, Stuart.
Hey there. How are you guys doing today?
All right, I am gonna turn everything over to George and Avi. So Avi, I'm gonna send you the screen right now. It's coming your way.
Fantastic. Oh, actually, trying to get it. Let's see. There we go. Just had to select the right screen. It's funny, Stephanie, we were just talking about how every different teleconferencing platform has different options. So glad I was able to pick the right screen, and we just want to thank everybody for joining us today. Today's subject that we'll be discussing is how IT can finally document and prove actual Citrix end user experience. As far as introductions, again, my name is Avi Lipp. I'm a technical consultant with Goliath. I focus on assisting our clients as far as implementation and training and use of our software, which we'll be demonstrating today. And also do want to introduce George Spiers, who I'm sure many of you are very familiar with. George, really want to thank you for joining us today. As you guys can see, he's a Citrix CTP. So again, George, thank you for carving out some time for us today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
As far as an agenda, we were going to focus on discussing some of the challenges that Citrix admins face on a daily basis. We'll then discuss how we're able to use, and when I say we, as far as Goliath, how our industry-only technology is able to assist Citrix admins in time to resolution, pinpointing root cause, and then really being able to document and prove the actual Citrix end user experience and what could be causing issues, how productive users are able to be within their session, the variables that impact all of that. And then at the end of today's session, have some Q&A. So without further ado, I was going to pass it over to George, who be able to share some insight on some of the challenges that Citrix admins face today.
Yeah, thanks, Avi. So yeah, talking about obviously today's challenge is managing a Citrix environment. So Citrix have thousands of customers. I think it's somewhere in the region of 300,000 plus, and maybe they're not all virtual apps and desktops customers, but as we all know, Citrix virtual apps and desktops is the most popular of the Citrix products and offerings. So we could safely assume that most customers are using CFAD. Now, in my experience, a organization that runs Citrix virtual apps and desktops, they need roughly 2, maybe 3 good Citrix experts to support that efficiently. And this isn't really different from other technologies used at scale in an enterprise, such as Active Directory or backup solutions, or maybe storage solutions. You typically have a team of 2+ people to manage that 24/7. However, from a Citrix perspective, the supply of Citrix experts is definitely, in my opinion, lower than the demands. And the additional problem is that those Citrix experts are typically tied up, spending 25 to 30% or even more of their time troubleshooting basic end user tickets. And what this, the challenge with that is it simply takes away from the true value of their skill sets, right? So they're tied up troubleshooting basic tickets when they could be doing much more with their knowledge. So that's one of the challenges. The next one is, and I'll touch on this next challenge here, it's the inherent complexity of the delivery infrastructure. We have a dedicated slide in the next slide, which I'll touch on further, but that's basically covering off the complexity of the delivery infrastructure that's needed for a Citrix environment. And then a third challenge is basically the lack of a good monitoring solution that gives that purpose-built intelligence and automation. If you want to move to the next slide, Avi, please. This slide really, this is where we're talking about that middle challenge there. It's the complexity of a Citrix environment. So, and this is basically why we need that in-depth Citrix knowledge to support it. So you have a number of different teams supporting the infrastructure that's needed to publish your applications and your desktops to end users. And those pieces of infrastructure, they obviously have to be performing optimally at all times, which will ensure a consistent and reliable end user experience. From the left of this slide, we see that we have users initiating ICA connections to their virtual apps and desktops. The users could come in from multiple locations. That could be a remote office or working from home, working from a public place like an airport, etc. And all these users use different devices. They use home PCs, corporate laptops, personal mobile devices. So straight away, you can see that complexity start to build, and you can see the opportunities for tickets to be raised with the help desk due to issues such as slowness within applications when working remotely due to latency, slow logins, or maybe just general access issues where the user hasn't got something like Workspace app installed. We see that quite regularly with remote users. And also the IT help desk doesn't control a lot of the remote working conditions. So they don't control the end user device. They've lost visibility of the network that the end user is using. So obviously that creates a lot of challenge for the help desk. If we move to the right of the slide and we move sort of more into the data center or the resource locations, we have the core Citrix components from your Citrix gateway, storefront servers, delivery controllers, all the usual stuff you'll see in a typical setup or virtual apps and desktops environment. And many of these different components that we have, of course, they all need to be maintained 24/7, as I mentioned, to ensure that the environment remains stable. Then we move on to the backend systems like the profile servers, Active Directory, SQL databases, licensing servers, and these could sit on a range of hypervisors or in cloud, etc. And they're all connected via different networks. So it's clear to see with all these different components that are managed by different teams, typically in an enterprise also, that it really does make that a challenging environment to support 24/7 for Citrix admins. So Avi, I would like to turn it over to you at this stage and see how can embedded intelligence and automation help with this.
Absolutely, thanks, George. And I think it's the embedded intelligence and automation that you're just touching on, as far as from a Goliath perspective, is very important, crucial in the foundation of our technology. So let's talk for a minute about how we actually do that. So if you look on the left-hand side of the screen that I'm sharing out right now, you're going to see the three areas that we find most common are the most common end user, I'll say, triggers for support tickets. So whether it's a user actually initiating their logon, the amount of time that it takes for that logon process to occur where the user is actually able to access their session, and then also in-session performance. So when a user is complaining about poor performance, oftentimes we find that it's going to be, in general, one of these three main areas. But the thing is, while those are just three main areas, on the right-hand side, we're able to see just a few of the dozen ways that those problems can manifest across any of the 15 to 20 different vendors, and the complexity of the delivery infrastructure really can impact in any one of those number of different areas. And for the end user, they're just saying, hey, my Citrix session was slow or it took a while to get in. So with Goliath, what we have is embedded intelligence and automation that out of the box, we're automatically looking for over 250 events, conditions, and failure points without any scripting or custom configuration that is needed on the customer side. And we're looking at all these different events, conditions, and failure points, whether on a threshold basis that's based off of industry best practices, and have the ability to either alert the IT team proactively as far as issues that are about to manifest before the end users are actually impacted. Then if they do occur, be able to document that so that we can then understand where the most problematic areas within the environment moving forward and make the appropriate changes. Now, traditional monitoring solutions and tools, they look at the independent performance of the different silos of the IT infrastructure. So whether that's the network, the server team, the storage team, and oftentimes if issues are occurring, and if you go down the line, you're asking, hey, how's everything look on the network side? The network team will say, hey, everything is green on our side. It can't be our issue. Storage team, same type of deal. And with Goliath, what we really do is we look across the entire IT ecosystem, collecting and correlating, interpreting all of these crucial and objective data points to provide the actual user experience from the end user's perspective, so that the IT team has the appropriate data at their disposal to be able to quickly pinpoint what root cause is, regardless of where that issue is manifesting across these different silos. And what this allows the IT admin to utilize Goliath to be able to do is allow them to be able to anticipate the issues before they occur. So whether that is based off of thresholds, some of the different dashboard views and the technology that I'll be showing, allow you to be able to troubleshoot more efficiently, be able to understand if it's an active session, what's impacting that user now, or since we don't average or roll up any of our data in the technology, if a user has been having issues for weeks and just says Citrix has been slow for the past 2 weeks, Goliath can then act as that Citrix defense tool to be able to show, okay, it's not Citrix that's the issue. This is a remote worker that continuously has a poor connectivity from their home Wi-Fi where they've been working. And with this, giving you those deep and broad metrics that allow you to come to those conclusions very quickly. And then on the right-hand side, being able to document all of this. So whether it's running reports on a daily, weekly, monthly basis on demand, and then whether you integrate this technology with third-party tools, have alerts sent up to a ticketing system like a ServiceNow or to an event management platform like a Splunk. And what this really allows the IT admins to do is move from being reactive to proactive. So what we'll do now is dive into the technology. George, I'm not sure if you had anything that you want to touch on before I do that.
And nothing for now, Abby. No, that was a good intro, yeah.
Fantastic. All right, so let's dive into the technology. And something that I touched on earlier is that when we deploy Goliath, and oftentimes this can be up and running in less than 2 hours, depending on the size of the environment, where automatically we are looking for hundreds of events, conditions, failure points, and thresholds that can impact user experience. So whether that's specific Active Directory monitoring rules, cloud-based monitoring rules, whether we're looking at NetScalers, if it's a Citrix cloud environment, your standard resource utilization. And so we're on a 24/7 basis looking for, again, hundreds of these monitoring rules that are based off industry best practices from CTPs such as George and others that are really have incredible insight into the EUC space. So we're looking for areas that can impact user experience automatically. No scripting is required. You can script within the technology, but for all these monitoring rules, they're automatically going to be deployed. And what's important about these in a number of different ways is, one, you can receive alerts on them. So again, if you want them to be sent up through a ticketing system or have the alerts be sent to a help desk, but they're also going to drive the different dashboard views within the technology almost as a heat map structure. And I'll use this first dashboard as an example. What I'm sharing out right now is the automatic discovery and dependency map for Citrix. This is frequently used as a NOC view. And we historically always think of NOC views more network focused. This is very Citrix focused. So when an IT admin logs into Goliath, this will often be one of the first views that they look at to see how is the Citrix delivery infrastructure performing right when they log in. Or for enterprise organizations, they'll have it up on a large screen at a NOC center, or if you're working remotely, have it just up on one of your monitors. Because not only are we going to map out the entire delivery infrastructure, as you can see here, say for any of the NetScalers, storefront servers, delivery controllers, and the supporting servers in the environment, but those monitoring rules that I was just talking about are going to drive this view as a heat map. So as issues start to arise on individual servers, they're going to turn from green to red or orange, depending on the severity level of the alert. So let's say that we're talking about an on-prem CVAD deployment, and there are some broker service errors that are taking place on a particular delivery controller. The delivery controller would automatically turn red, quickly drawing your attention to where you should be looking in the environment, and just as importantly, where you don't need to spend any time looking in the environment. And when you click onto the server on the right-hand side, you're going to see information such as resource utilization, context-specific health checks, as well as any of the alerts that are firing based off of that embedded intelligence and automation in the technology. At the top left, you can always toggle between multiple different Citrix sites. So whether you have an active passive setup or if you're a service provider and you are managing dozens of clients remotely, you can always flip to each of your clients within just a click. And this is very valuable in that case, is that this automatically discovers the delivery infrastructure. You may be taking ownership of a completely new environment that you had no part in building, but since the technology can automatically discover the different servers, map out the different delivery groups, like I'm showing out here in the delivery layer, the technology does the hard lifting of just being able to identify everything and brings it to you graphically. And on this particular view here, the delivery layer, we're looking at things more from a logical perspective. Seeing your delivery controllers mapped out to your delivery groups, to the machine catalogs, and any of the gold images if available. And then on the right-hand side, you're going to have information such as registered machines, unregistered machines per delivery group, sessions, disconnected sessions. Other information at for example, at the bottom right, where you're able to see what receiver version is out in the field. Is half of the organization on an older receiver version because users have just not upgraded in 6 months, or do you want the users to be on that receiver version because it works better with a particular application? Then you can always drill down to the machine layer, where it's going to take all of that down to the hypervisor cluster and to the individual hypervisor host that could be supporting these users. As I mentioned, often this is used as a NOC view, have it up on a large screen to get that 50,000-foot view, but it can also be a very effective troubleshooting stop. We were talking earlier about how there's different silos in IT where you have the Citrix team, or you have the network team, or the storage team. And in a case that happened previously, because the Citrix admin was able to get notifications that users on the same hypervisor host were all having issues, came to this view here, saw that there was a correlation with high round trip time with high storage latency, was able to take a screenshot of that, send it over to the storage team, asked if they saw anything on their end. They saw that there is snapshot-based backups going during that time, were able to pause that, move it to another time. Issue was resolved. So you can see how it can be a very effective troubleshooting stop for issues that can impact a large number of users in the environment. And this is just one of the different views that will automatically, again, update based off any configuration changes in the environment. And then here's a new dashboard that we just came out with, one of our most recent releases, where in one view, we talk about single pane of glass all the time in IT. Here you're able to see all the machines in your environment. So whether it's a Citrix, whether it's a VDA, whether it's a VMware hypervisor host, if it's a Linux machine, Windows machine, part of the delivery infrastructure, you're able to see all these machines in a single view, sort based off any type of resource utilization metrics, see which alerts have been firing off on them, and easily be able to search for any machine if you wanted to be able to view more in-depth information as far as how's the performance of that particular machine, both real time as well as historically.
Obviously, just sorry, one question for me. At least this data dashboard that's just behind this pop-up, does it automatically refresh? So when you're viewing the entire list of servers and you're looking at the CPU, does that refresh automatically, or how often does that data get updated?
Great question, George. So yes, what will happen with this is we're collecting data in a variety of different ways. So some of the data will update every 15 seconds. Some of the data within the technology will update within a minute or so. This view right here, it will update each time that you either hit the refresh or if you navigate to a different page. So as you go to one screen and then come back to it, it will then have the most updated data for you. And then be able to view it that way. So it's not going to be live updating right there, but there is a number of areas within the technology that will be live updating.
Okay, thanks.
Of course. Oftentimes we'll have clients that have the different dashboard views that'll kind of rotate here on a rotating basis and will automatically update. All right, so now that we've taken a look at things from a infrastructure perspective, we've looked at the Citrix delivery infrastructure, seen all the different machines in the environment. Now let's talk about really how to document and improve actual Citrix end user experience. The view that I just went to right now is the Citrix Virtual Apps and Desktop session display. And oftentimes, if you were to imagine, if you receive an alert from the technology that a user group is encountering performance issues, or if a user puts in a support ticket, this is the screen that the IT admins will most frequently come to begin their investigation. Reason being, this is going to populate with all of the Citrix sessions in your environment, both real time and historical. So let's take the scenario that a user called in, complaining about poor performance. You just type in that user's name. You'll see how the view dynamically filters based off of any of the text that is on the screen. So I'm now looking at just Joe's sessions from the past, say, let's see here, we have it pulled back at least for the past 2 months. And we want to dive into what could have been impacting performance in any of Joe's sessions. Right off the bat, we're able to see the client endpoint machine, client IP address to get some understanding of where that user is working from. Are they working remotely? Are they on site? Are they working from the same endpoint device? And when you're ready to dive into the user session. You just click onto it, and what will populate then is a summary view that is going to have all the high-level key data points that went into the user Citrix session. So we're looking at the server that they were accessing, client endpoint machine, receiver version that's on the endpoint, the hypervisor host that was supporting that user session, the client IP address. Here, in a single view, you're going to be able to see all of the components that contributed to that user Citrix session. So I know that Joe was working externally based off hitting the net scaler, that he was being brokered by this particular delivery controller. You have AD, the session host. Here, you're going to have a high-level log-on summary breakdown, allowing you to quickly see, was it group policies or profile loading that were the main contributing factors to a long log-on. And then the rest of the page is going to be about key performance metrics for in-session performance. Oftentimes, L1 or help desk do not need to leave this view right here to be able to pinpoint root cause. But in the event that further investigation is required, if you notice across the top, there's a series of dedicated tabs, such as for logon duration details, where we're going to give over 30 different stages of the logon process. Deep and granular ICA and HDX metrics, giving insight into how much bandwidth was available for that user, how much bandwidth were they using, and then even showing the individual virtual channels that they were utilizing, so you can get an insight into, was that user doing something graphically intensive? Were they on a Teams call and talking into the session utilizing audio bandwidth? Then we move into the data center, looking at the performance of the session host. So whether this was a desktop OS or server OS machine, how was that machine performing during the time frame of that user session? So this session took place on the 12th. I can see at 2:35, CPU on that machine was at 63%. Hypervisor host performance. Processes running on the session host. Any alerts that triggered during the time frame of the user session. And then any application or system error or warning events that took place during the time frame of the user session. And something that I find and our clients tell us is so valuable is that you're correlating data from a number of different, whether it's a tool like Event Viewer, Task Manager, VMware, Citrix, network metrics. We're combining all this data into a tightly correlated view for a single pane of glass to be able to cut down on the time to resolution significantly. What I'll typically do now is just show a couple different troubleshooting exercises that our clients do frequently come across to be able to prove the Citrix end user experience and what the actual issue was, because rarely is it actually Citrix that's the issue. Citrix just gets blamed. George, I don't know, I wanted to pause for a moment, see if there's anything that you wanted to add before I do that.
Yeah, nothing specific. I think it just reiterate what you said. I think coming in here and having all this information in one single place, it's going to be much easier for an IT admin to troubleshoot and find root cause quicker. And I suppose as well, they don't necessarily need to have the real in-depth Citrix expertise to understand some of this stuff, just because the way it's presented by Goliath. I think it makes it easier to interpret. Whereas some other solutions, for example, Director will only really give you a small piece of the picture, but not the full picture. So it typically would make it harder to troubleshoot, harder to find root cause. You may have to go to other teams and ask, those typical questions like, can you check your hypervisor? But with this, hopefully you can get that data that allows you to either find root cause yourself, or if it needs to be investigated by another team, at least as you mentioned in the previous one of the previous sections of this, is you could take a screenshot of, say, high CPU on a hypervisor or whatever, and it drives that conversation with the other teams, so you can have more meaningful conversations rather than just ask, is there something wrong with the hypervisor, without providing any sort of evidence. So that seems like a great thing to me, and definitely very useful.
Awesome. Yeah, I completely agree, George, and our clients would echo exactly what you're just saying, is that, you know, a lot of times, and we've touched on it on this call already, is that oftentimes IT departments are siloed. And so to be able to have the data, our clients tell us it actually enhances the collaboration between IT departments to be able to better come to objective conclusions and accomplish the end goal, which is really making sure that the user experience is as optimal as possible. So let's go through a scenario where this is a remote worker working from home. They're connected to their home Wi-Fi, and they're saying that Citrix is slow. How would we be able to identify what the issue is with Goliath? First place that I would want to take a look at is round trip time. So what I just did here is click into round trip time on this view right here. And what we can see is that what's valuable here is round trip time. We're showing it correlated throughout the time frame of the user session. So this session took place on April 12th. I can see that at 2:30 is when round trip time reached over 500 milliseconds. Often with other technologies, Director, it could tell you just the most recent data point as far as round trip time is 60 milliseconds, but you wouldn't have an understanding then of, was the user actually having issues at a certain point during their session. And we also have these data interpretation lines built in out of the box at 350 and 450 milliseconds, because at those points, that's when latency will likely be apparent to the end user. Latency can be apparent, at 200 milliseconds, depending on what they're doing. But especially, once you're getting above 450 milliseconds, that's when, it can definitely impact in a negative way the user experience. So we've identified when this user was having an issue. Now we want to understand what was causing it. And oftentimes it can manifest in any of those different ways that we were talking about earlier on, from an in-session performance, but it can be a network related issue. It can be resource utilization. It could be something that the user was actually doing within their Citrix session. First place that I would want to take a look at based off of the graph is network latency. So this network latency metric is the network impact on the ICA protocol itself. So this is not an ICMP or ping-based test. This is the amount of network impact on round trip time from the client machine all the way to the session host. And what we can see here is that network latency also spiked right at the same time when round trip time did. So right off the bat, I'm able to start putting together some observations that when this user was having issues, the network was one of the bottlenecks. Now, within the network, I want to understand, was it something on the client side? They're working from home, connected to their own Wi-Fi. Is it something there? Is it something internal? And where I'm going to get my answers with this connection speed metric. Connection speed is the amount of bandwidth that is available for receiver the workspace app to consume wherever this user is working from. So in this case, they're working from home connected to their home Wi-Fi. But if, say, if you're in healthcare and it's a clinician that's at the hospital site, or if you're an enterprise organization and you have employees working on site and they're wired in directly, or if someone's working at a Starbucks connected via mobile hotspot, it doesn't matter. This is going to be the amount of bandwidth that Citrix has access to for that user session. And what we can see is right when this user started having issues, again, with this being correlated throughout the time frame of the user session, we can quickly see that there's a huge drop in connection speed right when network latency increased, thus round trip time increased. A bottleneck here is conclusive that this user had a drop in connection at their location. And this is where you can then have a data-driven conversation with the end user. What happened at 2:30? We see that there was a huge drop in connection speed. And the user could be saying, oh, well, it can't be my ISP. I have plenty of bandwidth that's available. But you know what? That's when the kids got home and started streaming Xbox or Netflix, and that restricted the bandwidth that was available for Citrix. Or maybe this user, now that we're in April and hopefully it's going to be getting warmer, they walk outside farther away from the router, not understanding how that plays a role. The takeaway is within just 3 different graphs here, you can pinpoint that the user was having an issue and it was being objectively caused based off of a drop in the connection speed available on the client side. And if it wasn't a network issue, how was the machine performing during the time frame of the user session? We can see that CPU was increasing around that same time. Memory was high, so there could be multiple bottlenecks. We can see that memory is high on the session host. Maybe we want to see what the user was doing within their session. And as I mentioned earlier, we're collecting data on all the different virtual channels that make up the ICA protocol. So we can see, based off of, say, thin wire bandwidth usage, which is the Citrix display adapter, was that user doing something graphically intensive in their session? Did they have a large copy and paste job that hung up the session? And in this particular session, I can see that this user did start using a high amount of thin wire bandwidth right when their round trip time increased. So what it was a combination number of things in this case. This user started using a decent amount of bandwidth when they didn't have that much available, thus the higher round trip time. So once again, putting together data from a number of different areas, so whether it's network, user behavior, resource utilization, all within just a couple clicks to allow you to understand if a user's in an active session having issues, or if it was a historical session, we can put together trends of why the user experience may not be optimal.
Avi, just one thing from me as well. So you showed the pane, which the pop-up that had the different virtual channels, and there was a lot of data there, and a lot of different virtual channels. So I suppose just one thing is, if I'm looking at this and I'm trying to understand, well, what is COM2 BW in, or what is licensing BW out? As I understand, Goliath do have a knowledge base which explains what all these mean, so that if you were unsure, you could refer to the knowledge base, right?
Absolutely, George. I think that's a great point to bring up. So not only are we going to show you where the issues could be manifesting or the actual user experience, but then we have direct links to our knowledge base and support center. So where, depending on where you are in the technology, and it's across the board here, if there's, you can just click onto the question mark icon on the top right, and it will then give you details of the metrics that we're collecting. So to George's point, if you're not familiar with every single different ICA channel, because who is, we're going to give you the descriptions of what those are, what they mean, and most importantly, how to actually use this information to troubleshoot. So understanding if thin wire is above a particular kilobyte per second, what does that actually mean? Audio bandwidth above a threshold, so that the technology not only points you into what the issue is, but can help someone who may not have George's level of Citrix experience be able to understand what this data actually means. So yeah, fantastic point. Again, across the board, depending on which page that you're on, knowledge-based articles with direct links, whether you're within a session or if you're somewhere else within the technology, always have a quick question mark icon that can be able to provide some further clarification on any of the data or metrics that we're collecting within the console. So now that we've looked at a user session, what I want to show now is then how this can be easily shared, integrated, enhanced. It can be shared whether you're running on-demand reports, daily, weekly, monthly. You can have these sent to different business line managers. You can, again, integrate all the data into different third-party tools, and you can enhance it by leveraging dozens of out-of-the-box reports, configurable dashboards, and then also pre-built Power BI templates like the one that I'm sharing out right now. This is our end user experience scorecard. And what we're showing here is, and oftentimes upon deployment, we'll get this up and running right off the bat, and it can be used then as a benchmark, because we're going to give an industry-only user experience score at the top left that is based off of all the different, or a few of the granular metrics that we're collecting. So on the right-hand side, you can see all the users, and this can always be filtered based off of different delivery groups or based off of different users, in case you just want to understand the user experience scorecard for how the experience is for users that are working in a different city, different country. And based off of round trip time, ICA latency, network latency, connection speed, and these thresholds at the bottom left, we're able to then give you an overall user experience score for each individual user. Here I can see Cameron Ross, Jane Taylor are having some high average network latency. Maybe they're working from a particular office site that doesn't have a great network pipe. And you can see it very easily which users are having issues, and then how's the environment performing as a whole. We have this for a log on duration scorecard, how are initial connections, how are reconnects. Number of our clients in healthcare have a 30-10 SLA where they shoot for every initial connection to be less than 30 seconds, every reconnect be less than 10 seconds, and able to see how they are doing from that perspective. And then a variety of different types of dashboard or reports depending on each client's use case. This report that I'm sharing out right now is our end user productivity report, where we're actually, what happened when the pandemic started is that clients were asking for more visibility than just when a user logged in and when they logged off. They wanted to understand how productive the users are actually being within their session. Were they actually interacting with it? And so we have this report where you're able to see the user, client IP address, how they connected into the environment, when the session started, when the session changed. So this first user, Randy, as an example, session started at 9 o'clock, then logged off at 5. So during those 9 hours, Randy was interacting within the session, so mouse and keyboard input, for 7 of those hours, giving an interaction percentage of 78%. So just a number of different dashboard views and reports. This one's frequently asked by IT to be able to provide to, say, HR or someone who's of interest just to see how the users are working remotely. But again, just another type of data that we're able to provide for any of these type of clients. So whether it's Google, Cerner, all these customers, they trust Goliath to be able to provide the type of visibility. And a main takeaway from this slide is that, sure, we can scale to some of the largest Citrix environments in the world, but we can also have a price point and a ease of use that can support even the smallest Citrix environments. So it doesn't matter whether it's a small Citrix deployment or a large, we help clients of all sizes. And another takeaway is the amount of healthcare clients that we leverage or that we work with that leverage our technology to get, whether it's deep end user experience metrics around Cerner use or Epic applications. And with that, that was everything that I was going to share out. So at this time, George, was there anything that you wanted to add before we move over to some Q&A?
Not just the last couple of dashboards, specifically the end user experience scorecard. I'm just looking at this and seeing how it could be useful if a organization wants to baseline their Citrix environment. So obviously a lot of organizations are moving to cloud, and that could be Citrix Cloud, or they're moving their workloads to Azure or AWS. And it's definitely a question that I've had in the past is, what is my experience like today for my end users? And can you then tell me what it's going to be like after all the workloads have moved to, say, Microsoft Azure? So I'm thinking this could be a perfect use case for this dashboard. Obviously, it's great for troubleshooting, but also from a migration point of view, where you have an on-prem Citrix environment, you've got this user experience scorecard scoring all the users' experience, and then you move workloads to your Azure environment or whatever public cloud that you choose, and then you compare the data, and hopefully you get better results.
George, I think that's a awesome point, because how many, I mean, George, with your experience, how many clients are now migrating or have a hybrid approach where it's not just everything's on-prem, utilizing, they're on private cloud, public clouds. So there's, I'm sure that you do see that a decent amount, and something like this could potentially provide, as you're just saying, some good visibility into how was the environment performing when it was on-prem, and then be able to see now that, say, the workloads have been moved up into Azure or AWS. How's the performance after that migration?
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of customers that I've worked with that are taking the jump into cloud. I have one customer that's moved to Azure. I have also worked with other customers this past sort of 12 months that have a mixture of Azure, AWS, and on-premises, and they're split across different parts of the world. That was a global company, so there is a full varying amount of usage with cloud, and customers that are definitely taking that jump. That's definitely what I'm seeing in a lot of Citrix Cloud customer onboarding as well.
Right. And oftentimes, just in my experience, management loves these type of reports. They like seeing the colors, where a lot of us on the line are probably more about the details of the user session and the IT infrastructure. Oftentimes, management prefers something that's more high level here, where we can very easily see how the user experience score is as a whole, or per each of the individual users in a nice graphical representation.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, fantastic. So I guess with that, Stuart, I'm not sure if there are any questions that we wanted to that was everything that I was planning to show today.
Yeah, we actually have a lot of questions coming in. Okay. You want me to read them off to you, or that help you the best?
Yeah, sure. Actually, you know what? Here, yeah, if you want to do that would work just fine. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So first one we got here, they want to know whether or not we can drill down further into each login phase of a user session to find out the root cause.
Absolutely. Let me pull up a user session here, where on this logon duration drill down, you absolutely can. Again, we're going to show over 30 different stages of the logon process. So whether it's happening from the brokering perspective, if it's happening more on the client side, being able to quickly see these different stages, such as dry mapping, profile load, session creation. On the right-hand side, what's happening on the client side, the ICA file download. Did the user take a while to select a prompt during their logon process, and it just inflated the logon time? And this is without deploying any technology to the endpoint machine itself. And then showing you data such as client server validation, authentication, so which OUs that user is a part of, breaking down each individual group policy down to the policy name. So yeah, a lot of detail on the logon process and the sub stages of it.
Great. All righty. Next one, and this is something that I have had a lot of questions on related to you guys. Are you able to apply Goliath tech on cloud and Citrix DAS deployments?
Yes, absolutely. Same level of integration detail that I've been showing through these sessions. We have, whether it's Citrix, DAS, as it's now called, deployment, as well as on-prem. So absolutely.
Cool. Let's see. There's some questions about users and grouping them. I want to know whether or not you can group users by location, or show overall metrics for all the users at a particular site. So it sounds like, just how can we group and organize these metrics?
Yes, you can absolutely group by location. Really, however you want to group users, you can do that in reporting. You can do that for session, for the session display. So the answer is yes, you absolutely can.
Great. Let's see. Here's one that we can look at real quick. They want to see an example of whether or or example, excuse me, of application-based user experiences, if you don't mind showing that real quick.
Sure. So with these are a lot of, and if I'm understanding correctly, here we're looking at published desktop sessions. Now, as far as actual application usage, whether it's a published application, you're going to get that same level of detail that I was just showing. You'll be able to see which specific application it was that was being utilized. So if I'm understanding the question correctly, just being able to see the published application usage, you can then be able to also see, what processors were running high while using a particular application. So was Chrome leaking CPU or memory, and could that have been driving up resource utilization on the machine? If I understood that question correctly. So here's a couple of examples.
Yep. Great. Got some licensing questions here and pricing. Curious whether or not the licensing or the prices is based on users or CPU devices, something along those lines.
Sure, good question. So I'm going to answer that in kind of two different ways. The way how our licensing is done is per server. So the client will tell us that this is the size of the environment. We would then provide a license based off of that. Now, how cost and the financials go about it, that can be done in a number of different ways. So whether it's most cost efficient for the customer to do it on a per user basis or pay per server basis, the sales team is very good at finding a way that's most accommodating to that customer's environment and will be most cost efficient for them.
Great. How about data collection here? We got a couple on that. How's the data collection done? Is it agent based? Is the data being collected via WinRM, PowerShell, something along those lines?
Yeah, so that's another good question. What I'll do is I'll pull up a architecture slide real quickly that I think can be helpful with that. Let me just share that out. So as far as our architecture and data collection methodology, it's an agent and agentless approach. We do deploy a lightweight intelligent agent onto the VDAs and the infrastructure servers that the client wants to monitor. For the hypervisor integration, that's done agentlessly. And as far as the agent that we deploy, it is incredibly lightweight. We're talking 0.1% CPU of a CPU core, 25 megs on disk. If anyone on the line is familiar with Cerner, which is the largest Citrix customer and a EHR provider, electronic health record provider, we are the only technology of our kind that is able to deploy our technology into their remote hosted facility because of the very strict guidelines that our agent had to meet. So the agent's very lightweight, and the way how we collect the data again is part agent, part agentless.
Awesome. Let's see. Lots of questions coming in. Cool. This is great. Let's see. I got one here. This is a hot one. Can scripts be configured based on certain thresholds, such as disk space filling up, clearing out common temp folders so that they can do that, those kinds of things?
Absolutely, yeah. So within our monitoring rules, each monitor rule has the ability to execute an automatic remediation action such as a PowerShell script or a batch file. So our clients do leverage that scripting capability within the technology, certainly.
Great. Yeah, and there's actually a bunch of questions here about the nature of the platform itself. Is it on-prem, cloud, both? If you could speak back to that.
Yeah, absolutely. So traditionally, it is used as an on-premise solution. The customer hosts the Goliath application server and the SQL database. We do offer cloud-based offerings, whether we host it for the client. So you have a flexibility and a range of options depending on what the customer is most interested in doing.
Cool. Awesome. Let's see. Let's see if we can find something here. Oh, you guys are really throwing them in here. Here's one. Okay, so what kind of integration do you guys have with Citrix WEM? Ability to troubleshoot and see problems that are going on with that particular portion of the Citrix platform.
Sure. So out of the box, you will be able to see, especially where that's going to be leveraged is during the logon process, is you're going to be able to see in which sub stages of the logon process that could be negatively impacting the user's logon time. Now, there's going to be some different WEM stages in there and information. Also, things that that clients have done is create their own custom monitoring rules within the technology. So if there were specific event logs or specific processes that you were interested, so specifically around WEM, if that process is running high, have the technology
Awesome.
document that. So a number of different ways, depending on what information the client's interested on for WEM, we'd be able to very likely help them.
All righty. Let's see here. Yeah, there's several questions here about non-EUC workloads, SQL, Exchange, Azure VMs, integrations into hypervisors like AWS EC2, things along that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. So for us, it doesn't matter, where the machines are located, the type of operating system. We're able to pull that into the technology. As far as like any EC2 instances, we do have some in this lab environment. Just don't see exactly where they are right now, but yeah, absolutely able to pull in that information. We do have another technology, a multi-cloud monitor that's built on the cloud for the cloud, where it is looking at specific metrics in, say, Azure, AWS, for depending on what type of information the client's interested in.
Cool. All right, this is actually a really good one. I missed this one in the massive questions. When you're going to your leadership, they'd like to talk about, like, how do we sell this? How can we go in and make a case for Goliath as opposed to something that is a homebrew or free tool?
Sure, that's a great question, one that often comes up because oftentimes it's like, for example, Citrix Director. It's it's a good tool that can be helpful, and oftentimes it comes with your Citrix licenses, and so then it's oftentimes leadership will be, well, can't Director do this? Don't we have that type of insight? So what it really comes down to is, if there are problems in the environment, we're able to very easily show the value to the IT admin to say, hey, this would have taken us we've had clients that problems have been manifesting for months. And then once they got Goliath, they were able to quickly pinpoint it and show, hey, we were able to figure this out within just 3 clicks, where we weren't able to find this for months prior. Now, depending on selling to leadership and what exactly is their value driver point, like what would be most efficient for them, that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, but time to resolution, user experience, of being able to show that with areas such as this user experience score are areas that have had leadership be like, okay, you know what, we absolutely do need this. If you're saying that this will cut down the time to resolution, I can get nice reports to understand how the user experience is, and it's going to solve issues. Let's go with Goliath.
Great, thank you very much. I think this one's a good one here. There's always the question of delegated administration in a lot of these platforms. What's the user experience look like from the standpoint of, what maybe I can show to a person that's higher up in the leadership chain versus help desk admins? Is there a limit to the number of administrative accounts you can have, or the amount of nodes that you can be monitoring?
Good question. So as far as a number of admin roles within the technology, there's not a limit. The technology, you can have it sync with AD, so you can have the admin roles, you can have specific groups. Oftentimes with help desk, the IT admins will just give accessibility to specific views in the technology. And then we have custom built training for, say, help desk, which would then be different than for an engineer who'd be using the technology. As far as leadership, oftentimes it'll be in the form of reports. So all within the same console, you're able to get reports, whether it's based off of the user experience, the performance of the environment as a whole. So we like to say that it's a tool that can be used from an entry-level IT admin who's just learning how to use Citrix, because it's that actual, some of the views are so simple, to the most experienced Citrix admins like George Spiers and yourself, and then all the way up to leadership having these type of reports that can be available for them.
Great. Are there actual built-in report like samples that these guys can find online, or any like value-added guides, things like that that they can use to help make that case for, I want to go with Goliath and this is why, if they don't actually have it, available on-prem in a POC or something along those lines?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go to our website, just goliathtechnologies.com, there's a section of the website where you can certainly pull up the different reports that we have and different dashboard views, tech overviews. So here's the website right there. And then if there was anything that they were specifically interested in, they can always reach out to sales@goliathtechnologies.com, and we would have someone make sure to follow up with the client to make sure that we get them the information that they're seeking.
Great, awesome. We are a little bit over here, guys. There's still quite a few questions. I would just say from my own experience, like right there with the website, and then sales@goliathtechnologies.com if you guys have any further questions. Also, don't forget that you can always pop into the CUGC forums or talk to your local groups if you want to see more on Goliath Technologies. We can always arrange in your local groups to have them come and speak again.
Sounds great to me. I do want to just again thank you, Stuart, George, Stephanie. I really do appreciate you guys having myself on the line today, and it was great speaking with everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Abby.
All right.
Thank you, everybody.
Ready? I have a furry coworker that decided to start barking right when I did. Thank you again, though. Thank you so much. They really were a lot of great questions, and I love seeing that because it really means everybody's, paying attention. I love it. I will make sure, Avi, I'll get you those questions afterwards so that you can see what all came in. And have a good record of that. And then if anything didn't get answered, if you opted in to share your information, someone from Goliath can reach back out to you and answer those questions. But definitely feel free to reach out to us if you need more. Okay, so I know that some of you who may have opted in for a chance to win one of 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So be on the lookout for an email from me. As soon as I shut down the webinar, I'm going to pull the attendee report. I'm going to use a number randomizer, and I'm going to pull 4 names, and those will be my winners, and I will reach out and let you know. You can also follow us on Twitter @myCUGC and see who the winners are. And again, you'll get a copy or a link to this recording tomorrow, so be on the lookout for that. And just want to thank Avi and George and Stuart again for being with us today. It was a really great webinar. Thanks a lot, guys.
You're welcome. Glad to be here.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope we'll see you at another CUGC event soon. And hopefully we'll see you in Kansas City. Come on out. It's going to be a great time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.